Okay, so we are live. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everyone. For those tuning in for the first time, my name is Jonathan Weinberger. I'm the Authorized Unity Instructor for the official guide to game development with Unity, co-created with Unity Technologies. And today I'm here with Xavier Durand-Hollis Jr. He is the interface artist for Volition, the creators of Saints Row and Agents of Mayhem. So Xavier, thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So before we kick things off, there's also one more shout out is to Al Heck from Render Ready, who makes a lot of the VFX possible for this show. So I really appreciate the effort and time that he put into this. So to kick off the show, Xavier, you're an interface artist at Volition. What is an interface artist?
Yeah, so interface is I guess a longer way of saying UI. We really make all the menus and buttons and just kind of a lot of graphic designy stuff that normally you would take for granted in a video game, but there's actually a lot of work that goes behind that stuff. So like mini maps, little indicators above enemies, all that stuff falls under the purview of UI.
Very cool. And how long have you been working for Volition?
It's it's almost 3 years to the day.
3 years. And Agents of Mayhem was your first project?
That's right. Yeah, I came on towards the beginning of Agents of Mayhem.
Very cool. So I'm sure everyone's wondering, we have some demos of your portfolio work, which is just beyond crazy. And if anyone wants to check out his portfolio, there's a link in the description. Really talented. As an interface artist, what skill set do you have? Like, what software do you use?
Yeah, I use Illustrator a lot. Almost live in Illustrator, but we also use Photoshop quite a bit for a lot of our raster effects, and then After Effects for a lot of pre-visualization work. So kind of to show other designers how animation might work, or just how an experience might flow in a more visual, comprehensible way. And then we have a lot of our own proprietary tools that we use. Specifically to do a lot of the in-engine animation.
Very cool. Yeah, that's right. I imagine Volition Studios, I'm sure you can't talk about the engine, but I'm pretty sure you guys are not using like Unity or Unreal. You guys have an in-house engine that you guys use.
That's correct.
Very cool. Okay, cool. So there's actually going to be some questions later related to tools and kind of like what you do with them or anything like that. But how did you get started designing graphics?
Yeah, that started a really long time ago. I played a lot of kind of MMO type games. Specifically, I played RuneScape a lot, and that kind of led me to do some web development for my guild's forums. And I just got really into graphic design and kind of programming from there. And I started out very, very rough, but over years of trial and error, I eventually became semi-competent, I guess.
That's awesome. I mean, at least competent enough to land a job at a major studio, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and school really helped me refine a lot of that. Like, I didn't think I was going to specifically go into games. I thought, maybe I would just do, I don't know, ads or something like that. That was actually my first job. I did a lot of, ad campaign graphic design, but I put my heart and soul into it.
That's awesome. So mentioning school, so one of my favorite topics on the show is when we have creative talent in here and we're working with the creative industry, is what's your college background? Did you get a degree, and did you need that degree to get a job in this industry?
Yeah, so I got a degree in computer science, and I didn't initially decide to go into computer science. I went in undeclared. Wasn't really sure what path exactly I wanted to take. I had a lot of stuff that I was interested in. As for, whether it's required for game development, no. I think it helped a lot. School gave me a lot of kind of communication and networking skills that I might have not gotten otherwise. A lot of the people that I took classes with, they ended up getting jobs in the industry too. And nice. Actually, a couple of the folks ended up working at Volition, and that's how I got an interview there.
Very cool. All right, so that's really interesting then. And also for those who are listening, he mentioned you have a degree in computer science, but you became an interface artist in the industry. So you're an artist by a programmer first, which is beyond incredible. Most coders, myself, outside of stick figures, and I'm sure a lot of people are like that, But that is truly awesome that you can provide the artwork for your team and for your own games as well as code them. And
Yeah,
you
for sure.
mentioned, I think offline, you mentioned you actually make some of your own games. Is that right?
Yeah, I work with Unity a lot, just kind of like as a hobby.
Right.
I'm really bad at finishing my own projects, but they're a lot of fun to work on anyway, and
Right.
that's kind of where I get a lot of my like system level programming out of the way because my when I'm at work I have to focus on specifically interface, and there's a lot of interface systems to work on, but I don't get to do a lot of the actual like game mechanics or a lot of progression kind of skills and I don't know other things that I'm really into.
Very cool. So what can you tell us about like the process of creating interface art for a game like Agents of Mayhem?
Yeah, that was it was a very big and daunting task because when I came in, we basically were starting from no style. Like we had a little bit of an idea, but it was kind of it was very flexible, and I felt very fortunate that I came in at that time because I actually got to help shape a lot of the style of Agents of Mayhem, and that was a lot of fun to do. I worked with really great people. My lead is just amazing, and we worked together really, really well. A lot of it was just a ton of iteration. I start with one mock-up, and I show it to a lot of my coworkers
Right.
and designers, and of course internally with my UI team, and we just kind of drill into it and we say, yeah, I like that shape, or we kind of like this effect here, so we try using that a little bit more. One of the other artists take it, and then they kind of do their own take on that, and then we say that looks really cool. So it was very much a collaborative effort. Like I by no means single-handedly drove this style at all.
Right,
It was
right.
like we had really talented artists come in at the end, and he did this one effect that we just use everywhere, and it's kind of like the glowing edges. If you ever see some of the art from Agents of Mayhem.
Yeah, and we actually have a game reel. So here, if you want to keep talking about what you've worked on, I'll go
Sure.
ahead and actually play your game demo of videos that are off of your portfolio that everyone can find at, is it xavdev.com?
Yeah, it's Zavdev.
Very cool. Yeah, so, and you program these interfaces yourself because you can actually program them, right?
Yeah.
Very cool.
We work, so we have a couple of engineers that we work with that are dedicated to UI. So they do a lot of the engine level stuff, more of like the actual like data wrangling and how we get information from like, the city map to the interface. But fortunately, my computer science background helped me a lot with becoming, familiar with that and even like kind of digging into some of that stuff myself, which was nice to take, some of the load off of the programmers there. We do a lot of our scripting for the interfaces in Lua, which, for those of you not familiar, it's similar to Python. It's a very high-level programming language, very simple. I didn't know it at all when I came into the job at first, and just kind of picked it up. And then our engine's all in C++, and yeah, it's I think Volition is a little unique in that most studios, they have dedicated artists and then dedicated programmers, but a lot of our interface artists can also program at Volition. And
That's
so that
awesome.
helps us, kind of be a little more self-sufficient. It's not always the best because, as an artist, we don't always focus on reusability. We don't always focus on efficiency. It's kind of just like what's going to look the prettiest, what's going to be,
Right,
the quickest
right.
way to get my vision in the game.
Dude, that beyond cool. Okay, beyond cool. So a question just came in on the Discord server. How does UI during gameplay affect the performance?
Yeah, so we have an amazing team of engineers that just kind of take that all away from me.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And,
So you
and we don't have
to.
to. Yeah, we don't have to worry about that too much. We do have to be mindful of things like memory. So
Right.
if we have a list and designers can potentially populate it with like an infinite number of gadgets. For example, like we didn't know how many gadgets we would be supporting for every agent in Agents of Mayhem.
Right.
So we designed a list so it could be infinite. And because of that, we have to, employ special, we have to be mindful of, is this list going to take up too many resources, and how do we script it such that, it destroys objects when they're not needed anymore? And there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. But once again, our engineering team just did an amazing job, and we rarely had to worry about that kind of stuff.
That is awesome. So you're from, you live in Champlain, Champaign, Illinois, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, very cool. So and that's where Volition is, and you guys have is the gaming industry booming in that area?
We have a couple indie studios here, in addition to Volition. Recently Volition went through some hard times. There were some layoffs, but a lot of people, they were able to bounce back, and we've got Chicago nearby, which has a few other kind of great studios.
Right.
NetherRealms and Iron Galaxy. There's tons of great resources around, and Champaign, it's just great cost of living. It's
right for indie developers for sure, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. So it's nice to be able to save a little money.
That's awesome. All right, so let me hop over here to the Discord. There's some questions going on. So one simple question. Okay, so you also do, not only are you doing interface design, but you're also doing animations. Is that right?
That's right.
So what tools do you use for the animations?
Yeah, so we have our own in-house proprietary tool called Vinny, and it's very similar to Flash and After Effects in that, we have a timeline and we can put keyframes on there and whatnot.
Very cool.
And, the pipeline for that is we kind of have this bitmap sheet tool, which we then are able to put into Vinny, and we can manipulate all the objects pretty much however we want. It's a great tool, and it was interesting to work with a tool that was being developed while we were using it.
Right.
Something that a lot of people probably don't experience when they're using things like Unity or Flash. The feature set is there. So whether you like it or not, that's what you get. But with Vinny, we had a little bit more flexibility to say, oh, well, what if we had support for, viewing a 3D UI inside of the editor? And then one of our amazing programmers is like, yeah, I could do that. And then they hand it to us, a week from that. And we're like, yeah, that's exactly what we wanted. This is great.
That is awesome. No, that's like one of the best parts about working for a big successful studio is that you get all these in-house tools, and if anyone needs anything custom, you don't have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for source code from like Unity. It's like we'll just make it ourselves. What's really interesting though is the fact that you guys have done it for the art pipeline. I've actually never seen that before, having a custom art pipeline, because there's Photoshop is so established. You have Illustrator that's so established. So the fact that you have custom tools for that's pretty neat. So something that's like really big for game developers in the programming scene is open source projects. Are there open source animation projects that? I mean, what's your point of view on open source projects, and are there any for like the animation scene?
I don't know of too many for the animation scene. I really like open source projects. I picked up Blender recently. I know a lot of people give it a lot of grief for some reason. I think it's the interface or whatnot, but I found it actually, simple enough to learn, especially for it being completely free, and it's super powerful. So, big fan of open source stuff.
Very cool. Let me see here. Check out YouTube is there. Give me 1 second here. Just showing through the Discord chat. Let's see. So when you have when you're developing a game on, for instance, like a game the size of Agents of Mayhem, what are the typical roles that you would work with? Like, what is your day-to-day operation?
Yeah, so a lot of it is working with my lead to kind of, he communicates to me what the priorities are. There's also a lot on us to kind of dictate our own priority. But, for any given feature, we'll work directly with a few designers. And, it's very laid back, and that people can kind of just, come up to your desk and, they tell you what they're thinking. And, you can kind of have a little bit of back and forth on that. There's a lot of documentation and specs that we go through. There's a lot of work that goes into building up a feature and then making it reality, because we don't want to invest a lot of time for something that we're not, at least a little bit sure of.
That is cool.
Yeah, and of course, we work a lot with the directors. We had our design director, Anoop, on the last project. Worked with him a lot, there's a lot. Communication is very key when you go into the games industry. It's basically like 60% communication and 40% working.
Okay, very cool. So that's so interesting. So and how large is Volition? If last time I checked, I think they're like 250, north of 250, right?
Yeah, we got around there. I believe it's around 160 employees currently.
Okay, very cool. Man, yeah. So you guys are a big studio. So a question just came in. This is a really great question. So what's the barrier of entry for people trying to get into a studio and only have experience with software like Blender, Inkscape, and GIMP, like all the free software?
Yeah, I would say that, if you can produce the same level of quality as tools with Photoshop and all those things, and additionally, we put so much of an emphasis on your passion for making games, that if you just have those two things, I mean, we kind of don't care what software you work with. We're more results based, where we look at, your interface and judge it by that rather than exactly what skill sets you have. Because to be honest, like, I didn't come into Volition knowing how to use Illustrator, which, might be surprising. But I picked it up, and because I had a strong sense of Photoshop, I was able to get a lot of stuff done that you might do in Illustrator. But you do have kind of a flexibility to learn some of these tools. So I would say that if you can show that you can do that level of quality, it doesn't matter what kind of software you use. Blender, GIMP, whatever.
Very cool. So working in Champaign and pretty much like almost every studio, it's working in game studios, big and small on the East Coast, are very different than West Coast. So Volition, based on just, context that I know over there and yourself, you've been there for almost 3 years now. When it comes to like job stability, like the stigmatism with big companies is that when you're in California, it's not uncommon that you'll be on a game project for 6 months and then you'll walk across the street to the next studio. That doesn't really happen in smaller parts where the game industry is just like not all about Hollywood or anything like that. What is your take on like job stability with big companies at like for Volition?
Yeah, Volition, because we're in Champaign, there's not a whole lot of places you can just walk over to. But a lot of people have gone into just general software development if they needed to find another job. I mean, yeah, we do have Chicago nearby, but to be honest, we're not, unfamiliar with the fact that we probably will need to travel at some point to potentially the other side of the country if we need to, find another job.
And would you say now you got a job at Volition straight out of school, right? Mm-hmm. And it's because you had a connection that was already there?
Yeah, that was definitely a big help. They kind of talked me up and got the interview, and they liked what I had to show. So
very cool. And I think it's important to mention that the best and most, I'd say the easiest way to get into the gaming industry is to have a connection already at a studio, because referrals go much further than just running through resumes. And especially as a company the size of, Volition and other big studios, culture is everything, I'm sure. And, having a referral of a buddy that you can bring into a studio, chances are it's a culture fit, and they don't have to waste money vetting you and all this and all the training that's required. And from personal experience, referrals go a long way to get you into the industry. But if you have to start somewhere, definitely working at it on your own time, making your own projects, working in things like Unity, building up a skill portfolio to demonstrate to an employer is how you're going to get that job.
Yeah, by no means do you need to have a referral. I mean, we have candidates apply very regularly for our interface position that's open right now for interface artists. And a lot of them, they're just out of the blue, and we can get some really good candidates, and we just see that they have a strong portfolio, and when we talk, they say the right things. And It's like, I don't really care what school you went to. It doesn't matter what courses you took. I mean, if you could do it, you could do it. And I would say that, the biggest thing that school and kind of more structured courses can do for you is give you those connections and that kind of guide for how you should proceed. Because like I said, the biggest thing I really got out of school was I got to talk to actual people who worked in the studios. I got to make friends with people who actually ended up working in some of those places. And that was a big deal because, like you said, they're already familiar with you. They already know what you can do, and the gaming industry is very small compared to a lot of others. So word of mouth goes a long way, and definitely you want to make a good impression on those around you. But that's not terribly hard to do if you just have a passion for gaming and are willing to work with others.
Right. No, definitely. Totally agree. I mean, what you just said is so spot on around the entire industry for game development. So as an interface artist, what challenges would you face developing UI? like on a typical day-to-day basis? Like, is there ever a time where, like, for instance, what kind of problems do you face with UI?
Yeah, I would say a very common problem is just kind of it's kind of like artist block, where we're working on this style and we've brought it to a point, but we know this isn't where we're going to end up, right? We have more time on the project. We need to iterate on it. We need to drive it a little further. Where does it go from there? And that some of those days, I sit there and I scratch my head and I kind of just, do something, undo, do something, undo. and sometimes those days can be a little discouraging. But eventually things kind of work out if you kind of stick to it and work through your iterations and your designs. And this is where teammates are incredibly helpful because, if you're stuck, we call it tennis and we hand it off to one of our other coworkers and just say, hey, can you take a crack at this because I'm drawing a blank here.
I gotcha. So, how much of your job is creative freedom? I mean, does it start at a creative freedom standpoint, or are you kind of directed, give me this?
We work very closely with the art director to work within kind of the style boundaries of the entire game.
Right.
But we are given a lot of freedom to kind of find our own little UI art style. It still needs to play nice with the rest of the game. Like you see in Agents of Mayhem, right? It's all techie driven. It's purple. There's a lot of like highlighted lines and glowing, which is very much in theme with stuff like the Arc, which has all these glowing regions, and it's very very futuristic and techie. But we're definitely given a lot of freedom in that we sit there and we say, what exactly is this going to feel like? What are we going to want to try to hit?
That is cool. So a question from Discord came in from user LuckyDuck10. So she's asking, or he's asking, were you always an artist? Is it harder to get into a company as an artist compared to a programmer?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say that it can be, but it also depends on, I guess, what kind of an artist you're applying for. There's many art positions, and there's also a lot of different programming positions. Like I would say, if you wanted to get in as a rendering or engine programmer, those positions are typically taken by very senior people who have been working in these tools for a very long time. But if you want to go in as a general programmer or gameplay or tech artist, which works with a lot of like tools and helping the artist kind of create stuff,
right.
Those are some of the more entry-level positions, I would say. And for artists, if character art is a notoriously hard one to get into. But I found with UI art, there's actually a lot of demand for that right now. And, there's not a whole lot of people applying for those positions. So when it came time for me at the end of school to figure out what I wanted to do, I thought, well, I really like doing interfaces, and I'm going to start building my portfolio around that.
Right.
And I think that's one of the most important things you can do. Whether you're shooting for art or programming, you want to build the portfolio around what you think you're strongest at, what you think you will be able to contribute most at. And that's more and more important the bigger of a company you apply for.
Very cool. So you mentioned something about character artists are really hard to come by. Why is that?
Again, I think a lot of those positions are reserved for just really senior, proven,
right.
Salted veterans. Because
cool.
a lot of these guys, they're just amazing. And concept art, I have a lot of respect for that because these guys can crank out amazing pieces, which, you look at from a distance and you're like, whoa, there's a lot of detail there. Then you look in a little closer and you're like, actually, this looks kind of blocky, but I get it. I can see what they're trying to do here, and it's amazing. Right. And they pump these out, really quick. We work with a lot of talented outsourcers in our own in-house concept artists at Volition, and I'm constantly stunned by the quality of the work that they put out.
That is awesome. Yeah, as like a code monkey at heart here, anything above a stick figure just blows me away, and I'm just like, I'm like, oh my god, that's so good. I wish I could do it. Even like working in Photoshop, like if I could just make amazing UI, I would be so happy. What's really interesting too, though, is it's the same way for the programmers in the industry. So as an engineer, we have different fields. There's like gameplay programmers, there's AI programmers, we have networking programmers. If you're an engine programmer, you're going to be like a graphics programmer. Mm-hmm. And like we have so many programmers, but we don't have enough good programmers. So like right now there's a market shortage in this industry, and I think I've read that by 2020 we're going to have like 600,000 jobs available with only 200,000 qualified engineers. And that's between the gaming industry and the software industry, corporate world, and all that. So it's really competitive, and I've seen with art too. I mean, it's just it's competitive. It's competitive one to get a job in the gaming industry, but good artists are a dime a dozen as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we got a question from YouTube from Al. How do you and your department feel about negative reviews or streamers doing playthroughs of the game you made?
Yeah, that's always tough, to watch. But really, you're kind of in love with your craft.
Right.
You see what you made, and you know the work that went into it. Your colleagues know the work that went into it, and really what these people, they're picking apart your game. They're not doing it for no reason, right? Even if somebody just says, "Hey, this game just sucked," there's some nugget behind that, and I think it helps to, try to drill down exactly on what people didn't like. Try to learn from your mistakes, and we generally try to keep things positive. I mean, that's obviously hard. Like AOM did not do so well sales-wise, and that was very hard for our studio morale-wise. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of people were very proud of what they made. It's unfortunate that it didn't come together as well that we had hoped, but
right.
I could say that things like the VFX and the city art and combat, those were all very fun, very enjoyable. The UI team, I'm so proud of the team that I worked with. I think we really knocked it out of the park with our style, and we just everybody did a great job. It's just games are so much more than the individual components, and if they don't come together the right way, and things in marketing, if it just doesn't all come together in the right way, you don't sell.
Right. No, that makes sense. I mean, from my understanding, and it's public news that maybe it didn't work out as well as it did, although it is still such a cool game. And I mean, to be able to say you've worked on a project like that and is Volition considered a AAA studio, or are you guys independent?
Yeah, we're considered a AAA. I think kind of in a weird phase. Saints Row, I think we aspire to deliver AAA quality games. Like, that is our #1 goal.
Right.
We want to try to deliver this experience that you would find normally from companies like Ubisoft or from EA, but with a team of 10% of the size. So that presents a lot of challenges, and we have to be very careful with how we scope things. We have to be very precise. We have to be very intentional with a lot of our decisions.
Right. Very cool. So we are just about halfway through our stream here. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a minute. So stay tuned, guys. Hi, my name is Jonathan Weinberger, and I've been developing games with C# and Unity for the last 6 years. I've helped thousands of developers learn to code and improve their skill sets. I currently teach game development on Udemy, an online marketplace for courses. Udemy has over 17 million students learning everything from game development to piano or cooking. Enjoy courses on any device and at your own pace with lifetime access. My course, The Ultimate Guide to Game Development with Unity, is designed to teach you the fundamentals of C# programming in Unity. We'll cover everything from receiving user inputs to creating destructible objects. By the end of this course, you'll make 2 high-quality games you can share with the world. This course is for anyone who wants to learn game development or refine their technique. Whether you're interested in game development as a hobby or you want to make games professionally, this course will grow your programming skill set and help you go on to make your own games and applications. Click on the link in the bottom left of the video player to access a special discount for this course. I look forward to teaching you more about game development with Unity and C# on Udemy. All right, so we are back from our little break there. So we got some questions coming in from both YouTube and the Discord, so I want to go ahead and take some questions here. Here's a question for you. So you're already a professional in the industry. You can program. You work on your own indie projects. Do you keep building a portfolio on your off time for future projects?
Yeah, that's something that I should probably do a little bit more of. What I've been doing in my off time is Not as much interface stuff, but more kind of game designy type things. I'll try a lot of, programming systems, or maybe trying to do some, I don't know, some really bizarre programming challenge, like, I don't know, procedural, or
Right.
building my own editor for like wrangling all this data. Because, if I've learned a lot from Volition, it's just like how in depth a lot of these systems can go, and how like intelligently a lot of these are built. From the
Right.
ground up. And so I try to take a little bit of that home with me, and craft it into my own work. I feel like I get a lot of my art experience from work. So when I go home, I try to, gear it more towards the programming side.
Very cool. So David also has a great question here. When a company is evaluating interface artists, how much do you care about in-engine or in-game work versus just like a portfolio of here's what I've worked on, like my sprites, does it have to be in-game footage or in-game material, or can I just have a portfolio of everything I've done in Photoshop?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that whatever shows best is what you should provide to your potential employer. If you have just a killer game that you made, and your UI is like all fluid, animating, looks beautiful, absolutely show us in-game footage. But we also won't say no to just videos or pre-visualizations or mock-ups, still graphic design images.
Right.
We even have people send us just logos and things. Like, all of that stuff is helpful for us to determine what kind of quality you can deliver graphic design at. I would say that if you can prove that you can work in engine, at some studios that's going to be it's going to get you further than others. Just because, like I said earlier, that some studios, they will have artists they do art. And then they have the engineering team, which then implements their art into the game directly, and the artists never have to touch a line of code. But with other studios like Volition, we do a little bit more of a hybrid approach, where we expect the artist to do some programming, but we also do have an engineering team that we will work with to finesse some of the more engine level problems.
Gotcha. No, that totally makes sense. Working in the casino industry, it was the same way. We would have an engineering team, and then we would have our UI UX team, and they were actually responsible for not just rendering out all of their artwork, but also setting it up in the actual scene. So we use Unity at work. They were responsible. They needed to know how to use Unity, because they had to be able to export packages. They needed to be able to set up prefabs,
Right.
and be able to work and contribute to the development lifecycle, more than just being an artist. So definitely getting familiar with some sort of industry game engine is probably really useful for a job.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it can't hurt. The
Right.
more technical skill that you have, I think that's just going to help you no matter what kind of an industry job you land. It's definitely like very specific to the studio that you're applying for. So I would say when you're crafting your portfolio or deciding what skills you want to learn, be mindful of the studio that you're applying to. If you know that the studio you're applying to is a Unity studio, or they use Unity, you probably want to get familiar with that software. If they use their own proprietary engine tools, Unity is still a great option, but you've got a little more flexibility, where you can dive into Unreal a little bit, or Flash, or HTML, really whatever. But the technical skill really goes a long way.
Very cool. Yeah, totally. All right. So another question from Lucky Duck in the Discord. Do you have to work on more than one project at a time?
At Volition, we have been typically, as long as I've worked there, we've been a one-game studio. So for the duration of my past 3 years, I've been working on Agents of Mayhem.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, and I'd say for any studio you work with, it's always great to have one game focus. Although, do you ever feel like you'll get burnt out on one game project?
I mean, that definitely happened. I didn't burn out, but I definitely was kind of at a point where I'm like, oh, okay, like I've been working on this style for like a year and a half now, and this is how far I've gotten, kind of deal. And you kind of have to, build some mental fortitude, and really just focus on keep moving forward, to the next thing.
Right.
You're not going to have the right answer even when the game ships out the door. There's always going to be something you want to change. So you kind of just got to be in the mindset of, I just need to keep moving forward. I will say that there are studios out there that, people are expected to work on multiple projects, and typically they do a lot of like contract work for many clients at a time, or for other studios, like Bungie, right? There's studios out there that will just do the multiplayer for some of these games, right? And they have to work directly with that studio to get the job done. And I don't know quite what that's like, but I imagine there's trade-offs to both.
Very cool. So what can you tell us? So a big thing with the gaming industry too is, and this is where I view the trade-off between the game industry and like the corporate world, is what's your experience with crunch? And can you explain crunch for those who are watching that aren't familiar with that term?
Yeah, so crunch is a very common term if you are a game dev. It's something that you'll want to ask in an interview if you get one, and it's basically when it always comes down to the wire. There's always some feature that has this bug in it, or there's always this feature that hasn't been implemented 100%, and you just need to get it done, and the deadline is, next week or something like that. That's an extreme case, and that more happened in like school. But yeah, like in school, I would be working like all night to try to get the game just like building because we broke something at the very last minute, and guess what? It needs to build. The game needs to run. It needs to work. So you need to stay there until it's working. At bigger studios, I would say crunch is it varies from studio to studio, right? But you have a little bit more security in that there's a lot more people that can take care of some of those minute things. It really depends on your role. Like, I know people at Volition who would, pull insane hours, on mission scripts or something like that. And it's, it's a shame, but it just has to get done. Right. And in different studios handle that differently. We try to mitigate a lot of that with a lot of planning. We have an amazing production staff that, is responsible for kind of, tracking everybody's work and, seeing where people are over allocated and trying to distribute some of that. Right. But inevitably, something is going to go south on you, and you're going to have to pull those extra 8 hours.
Very cool. Yeah, that actually sounds like it's a pretty good experience of crunch in your experience with Volition. I've worked for studios where crunch can be sometimes when you get into crunch, you're looking at like 60 to 80 hour work weeks. And then the best case scenario is, you're capped at like a 40-hour work week, which fortunately the casino industry is like that, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. We try to do it. We try to enforce a work-life balance at Volition. We have flexible work hours too, so you could roll in at 11 if you want to, or you can come in every day at 8 a.m. And so some people, they actually do take advantage of that, and they come in at like 2 and then they leave at like 10.
Right. No, and that's awesome. And definitely, guys, if you're listening and you have an interview, ask about flex time, because nothing feels better than being able to wake up naturally, not having to just rush to an office at like 8 a.m. if you don't have to. We had flex hours in the casino industry, and I'd roll into the office around 10:30, take my 2-hour lunch an hour later, and then I would just work until like 4:30, 5 o'clock. But you were supposed to like stay, but like ideally you're supposed to, if you come in around 10:30, you could stay till 7, and it didn't matter. But what's most importantly too about this industry is get your work done. If you get your work done, usually no one's going to be on your back about a time tracker or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. At Volition, we kind of choose. We're kind of expected to choose, just how much we can handle. And there's a lot of what's the word? We try to motivate people to take their own initiative. So, if you see the need for something, we typically give people a lot of leeway to kind of, do it and then demonstrate its value and talk about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really great, and I've totally made changes like that, especially for like one of the latest AOM patches, where I decided to do a bunch of icons, and I ran it by some of our directors, and I ran it by the people who are going to be shipping the actual patch and whatnot, and yeah, it made it in, and I was really happy about that because I thought it was a really good change.
All right, so that is actually really awesome. So someone just asked a question about the kind of input you have. So like that means that, if like what kind of input do you have on ideas, or does it all come from a higher up? Based off what you said, it sounds like you do have some sort of input if it's good.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to put your ego aside for a lot of this. That you might have an idea, but it's not going to be executed the way you thought it was initially. It could be end up very different, and you need to be okay with working together with a lot of people and listening to their points of view and kind of understanding their expertise. You need to let people be the experts in their area. So if I say that I want to have one of our characters have a flamethrower shooting out of their arms, and I don't have any way to implement that, it's probably going to get turned down, right? But if I show that it's feasible, and then I show that it impacts the game positively, I talk with the right people, go through the proper channels, then there's a very good chance it ends up making it into the game.
That's awesome. Let's see, we have a question here in YouTube. When evaluating, let me see here. Oh, sorry. How did you feel when you started progressing and when you finished your first game? Okay, so how did you feel when you finished your first game at Volition, which I imagine took almost 3 years?
Relief, I think, is the word that comes to mind. You spend years on anything. It's kind of unreal when it's over. I kind of got attached to the project, and suddenly I had to switch off to other things. So I was like, this is unsettling. But but it was just mind blowing to see people play the game once it released, and it was mind blowing to see the stores like stock your game that you had a hand in, right? We went to Walmart, we went to some of our other local stores, and it was there. We were taking pictures of the stuff, totally nerding out over it. We saw it in like Redbox, and we were like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!"
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, that's a totally different feel from just putting your game in the digital marketplace like Steam versus actually having a physical copy of your game, which only a select handful of studios are even able to do just because of the barrier to entry. So that's super awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if I have it here. I got a really cool steelbook version of AOM. Maybe I might be able to find that while we're talking.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
We got handed those, and oh my gosh, it's seeing this, having the physicality of this stuff in your hands, and seeing kind of the marketing go forward. It's just it's jaw dropping.
Right. I mean, especially in the commercials, right? Because it's your UI in that commercial. I mean, that is so cool. I can only imagine how that must feel. So I got a question coming from Discord from Battle Drake. So Volition does its own proprietary software, which a lot of people know about that. Are you given a time frame when, is there a learning phase? Like when you apply to a company like Volition and several others, you don't know how to use their software. You may come from a Unity background, but they hire you. I mean, what is it like, the onboarding process for companies like Volition that has proprietary software?
Yeah, you're gonna find that it's very different depending on what studio you go to. Everybody has their own onboarding technique. Me, I was paired up with a mentor, and they kind of helped me get stuff set up my first week. They kind of introduced me to a lot of the tools, and they sat me down and they walked me through how to do some very simple stuff. But you do have a lot of expectation when you come in that you've at least dealt with the same kinds of things. And I would say that our studio did a really good job of our tools aligning with things like Unity or things like Flash, which that's what a lot of my background is in.
Right.
And it was pretty seamless to transition from one to the other. There was just the learning curve of okay, what are the shortcuts? What are the little quirks? Dealing with bugs in the software that I'm not used to dealing with. Just a lot of little things. But there's definitely they would definitely give you time to learn the tools and ramp up on that stuff. They're not gonna plop you down with something you've never used before and expect you to pump out a full screen, in a couple days.
No, that's really cool. So another question that came through is, what is your take on, so Volition's about 160 man team to create these amazing games. What is your take when a company that's maybe a size of 5, an indie company that puts out a game, that's just beautifully stunning, does extremely well. I mean, what's your opinion on that versus like indie versus AAA status? You know, it's
I
Five
think,
Guys.
yeah, I mean, tools have come such a long way. Even in the time that I've just, that I was in school, the tools came a long way. I
Right.
started out with Unity 3.5, and I had to do all my Unity GUI through that old system, and that was a nightmare.
Oh, I know. Yeah, the scripting. Oh, it was
Yeah.
awful.
Oh
It
my
was
gosh,
awful.
some of my games, like we went back to them like a year later, and we're like, oh, maybe we could fix some of this stuff that we never got around to, and we're just like, nope, I'm gonna close
That's
that.
funny. Yeah,
I'm
there's
never
there's
gonna look at
actually
those scripts.
there's actually someone in this chat right now, Al, who I worked with him on teaching him that old UI system, and we scripted like this entire full functional UI menu, and it took like 2 weeks to script that. It was
Yeah.
insane.
That was a lot of work.
Yeah,
back
today with the new UI, I mean, oh my God, you can put together a main menu in 10 minutes. It's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, again, it's amazing how far the tools have come, and it puts a lot of pressure on studios to deliver a higher quality bar and to
Right.
really hit that level of polish, because we are not unaware of the fact that a lot of these 5-man, 10-man, even 20-man teams can start to compete in our space.
Right.
I think Volition has carved out for itself, an open world, which is very difficult to do in a lot of engines. Maybe impossible in some things that they just don't have support for the streaming
Right.
technologies that we've had to handcraft and build up.
Very cool. So it still gives you kind of an upper edge.
Yeah, we have a lot of really good tech here. I mean, we just have like some of the most incredibly talented engineers. I haven't worked in the industry for long,
that's
but
no secret.
yeah, they're amazing. I mean,
That's
like
awesome.
it's just wizardry. That's all I can explain it as.
That's funny. So you mentioned you work on your own indie games. Has the work you've done for Volition kind of influenced any of your personal projects?
Yeah, we do a lot of. There's a lot of particular paradigms that we use with like how we handle data at Volition that I've kind of latched onto. Just a lot of workflow things for when I'm building UI screens. I now try to do that when I'm in Unity, or I try to build my own components or tools in Unity to do that for me. There's a lot of stuff I take for granted that I do at work or that I do in Unity that don't
Right.
translate to one way or the other. So there's a lot of give and take. Like I definitely, I love Unity's UGUI system, its new system. And so we incorporate, we have a lot of feedback for our engineers, and we take a lot of our inspiration from Unity's component system, or just, the way they handle transform hierarchies, or,
Right.
We do a lot of things uniquely, but there's definitely a lot of cross-pollination, especially since we have, I'm working with those tools in both settings.
Very cool. So I'm scrolling through the chat here. There was one question about, someone asked, what is an interface artist? They just showed up. And also, what tips do you have? So to demonstrate what an interface artist is, I'm going to go ahead and play your demo again. But what tips do you have for someone who wants to become an interface artist?
Yeah, interface art is, you got to like graphic design. Gosh, I mean, where do you really begin? It's take any game, I guess, any game that you really like, and start looking at things like health bars. Start looking at things like how it transitions from in-world to the screen, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that you just take for granted. Like on some of the videos that we're playing now, the transitions between in-world and between like a completion screen, all the different icons, just start taking a look at those things. And what's kind of fun to do is take a UI that you feel, or experience, like a game experience that you feel like could be improved. And I don't know, do a screen capture mode to get rid of all the HUD on the game. A lot of games support that. And kind of block in your own. Or you don't even have to do that. Just kind of start wireframing stuff out. There's a lot of work that goes into, where do I place my health bar? Where do I show the info for all my different enemies? And you'll be surprised how complicated that gets, especially when you have to start wrangling a lot of data in things like JRPGs. Like, if you want to really stress test yourself with building a UI, just try like redoing the Final Fantasy UI, and and it's insane.
That's cool. So like you mentioned this before, like with your personal projects, it's so hard to finish making games in general. It's so hard to finish, but also on your own personal projects, the hardest thing ever. And it's a popular topic in these chats is I can never finish a game, right? Do you encounter that with art? You know, from a programming standpoint, I look at it as there's so many things I have to do. As an artist, is it the same way? Is it just like you feel like, oh, there's just so many art pieces that I have to make?
Yeah, so I think at work it's a lot easier because, you know, you're in the environment, you're in the setting, people are depending on you. And when it's just me, I'm just one of those people that are not very good at holding myself accountable. You know, I'll go to the gym and work out for 3 weeks and then, you know, just forget all about it.
Right.
But, you know, that's different for everyone. And some people are more self-driven than others. I would say that, you know, if you are like me and you find it hard to motivate yourself to finish a game, start it with other people or enter a contest. You know, game jams are great because they have very clearly defined requirements. You know, this theme, 48 hours, go, you know. And you could do that by yourself or you could do it with a team of other people. But I think the more like constraints and due dates and the more achievable you make your goal, the easier it is to finish something. My buddy and I, we entered this this film contest kind of deal was going on, but they also had like a section for making your own game. And it was the first time they ever did it, so the rules were kind of loosey-goosey, but my friend and I really decided to dedicate ourselves to this. And we came up with like the most dead simple idea. It was basically like a Guitar Hero type thing where you would press keys that line up with notes going by. And that was our starting idea. Like, we knew that we had a month to make this, and we wanted to get it really, really polished. And any feature that you tack on adds an incredibly large amount of work, especially when you want to finish everything like, you know, main menus. You want everything to be pretty and animated and transition nicely. You want to have all your art. You want to have a lot of content, you know, so all the different levels that you have to make and all the different, you know, sound that you have to put into the game. Audio is a huge thing that, of course, is always like usually the last thought when I'm making games. But there's so much that goes into making a game. I would highly recommend, if you want to do your own project, to scope it down to just the most dead simple idea. Like, start with something with like a game about a chicken crossing the road. And I don't know, see where you can go from there. Iterate on it. Get that polished, feeling good. Get your core mechanics like you know, iterated on, and go from there. Because it's a lot easier to build off of something than it is to try to finish this huge scale system.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, that was excellent advice. Everyone write that down. that was so good. So accurate. So speaking of game jams, are you participating in, is there a global game jam by you in Champaign?
I haven't participated in a game jam for a really long time. I think since school was the last time I participated in one.
Very cool.
But they are a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. And for those listening, the Global Game Jam is going on this month, at the end of the month. I believe it's January 26th, and it's all over the world. So check out their website for the closest location to you.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So here's a question from Discord. You may or may not be able to answer this one. If you can't, it's okay. Do you have to worry about infringement on other games? There's so many games. How do you protect yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to worry about that a little bit, but I mean, typically that's up, like, you come up with the idea, you go through the right channels, and you know, we rely on our legal department for a lot of the stuff. Like, ooh, is it okay that we made a Man of Iron skin for Hollywood? Like, what's that referring to? I don't know.
Right. Very
yeah,
cool.
so, you know, some of this stuff, you know, we kind of play on the edge a little bit, but it's you know, the bigger the studio, I think the less you personally have to worry about that. There's definitely there can be a lot of cases of like you use kind of like a reference art piece and you might check that into source control, and you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't put other people's art, you know, in your you know, collective repository of everything, which, you know, for those of you who don't know, is kind of like a server that stores all the data that everybody shares across the company.
Oh, so that's interesting. So talk about like asset management for a minute. In your organization, so like working in other game studios, we use something called like Alien Brain. Are you guys familiar with that?
I have not heard of it.
It's like a art asset management system where basically it's a product that allows you to just share assets across the network. So like when an artist is pumping out work, they can just like store it on the database and we can just pull it directly. Like engineers can just pull it from Alien Brain.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's almost like a Dropbox, but for game artists. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, Dropbox I would say is like the most like rudimentary kind of like source control that you could have. We use Perforce, which you can actually.
Perforce is a popular one too. Yep.
Yeah, you can download a free version of that and either set up your own server. There's a little bit of work required with that. Git is another source control thing that might be worth looking into. It's free. Source control is really important when you're working with a team of 100 plus people.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we are approaching the end of our stream here. There's one last question. When it comes to working as a team, especially a team that's the size of 100, 160, and you have inner teams, right? You have your art team, your engineering team. Do you guys work with Scrum? Or do you guys do traditional waterfall?
Yeah, I mean, last project it kind of varied. We have kind of our own, we do stand-ups every day, right. Which kind of adheres to some of that Scrum policy. But we're very much kind of like, if we don't need it right now, there's no point in making it, standardizing it or anything. So I would say that most days we kind of backed it up to like maybe like a weekly stand-up in slower times or like a daily stand-up with individual teams when things are more intense. I definitely was meeting people daily, meeting entire groups daily towards the end of the project, just to kind of like, hey, how's DLC coming? How is this and that going? I would get up and say, hey, yeah, I just finished this thing for a safe word, and you kind of go through those updates, and we have a producer there who's writing everything down and tracking everything for us. Okay,
cool. So there's some Scrum methodology going in. They might not have like active sprints, but communication is the big key there. Is you have producers and directors involved, and communication every day is going on.
That's right. Which
is pretty standard across every game company I've ever worked for. It all happens. You have your daily stand-up. You'll have a producer assigned to your team, and yeah, their job is to make sure you're getting your stuff done without hopefully micromanaging you.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we are wrapping this up. I just want to go ahead and say a quick thank you to Sam for the overlays, Al for all the VFX stuff, and Xavier for coming on this show. Thank you so much. If you want to check out Xavier, you can find him on Twitter at AxeRaider70, as well as check out his portfolio at xavdev.com. There is some insane artwork that he did for Agents of Mayhem on there. I highly recommend you check it out. It's so cool. And I appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Next week, we have a live AMA with Alex Fry, who is the executive game designer on RuneScape. So if you ever played RuneScape or you grew up playing that game, I played it from I know, right? I played that game from like 2002 to 2006. That was my game. It should be a really exciting stream. We have Alex Fry next week. So thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.
Later.